Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Tuesday. It is match day, of course. Arsenal in Champions League action a little bit later on today. Thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I hope your day is going well, wherever you are watching or listening to this round the world. As I said, on match day, Champions League nights are back for Arsenal this week, taking on Slavia Prague tonight over in the Czech Republic. So we'll preview that game in today's show. Going to look at predicted 11s. Loads of you guys have been getting in touch, giving your thoughts on what you would like to see Mikel do when it comes to the starting lineup today. So we'll have a look at that. We're going to talk about Viktor Gyokeres. Of course, some quite concerning, I would say, comments from Mikel Arteta on Viktor Gyokeres. We know he hasn't travelled for the game tonight. So that's a blow. And we'll look at what Mikel's had to say about him. Also about the Carabao Cup quarter-final. It's now been announced, of course, that's going to be played on the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas, 2 days after Arsenal's trip to Everton in the Premier League. Mikel Arteta did not sound very happy when he was asked about that in his press conference yesterday. So we'll look at that as well. But we'll start on Viktor Gyokeres, shall we? Who, of course, I was down the training ground yesterday. He wasn't there. He wasn't training. He hasn't travelled. Mikel's confirmed that. And yeah, a little bit worrying what Mikel had to say. So we'll go over the quotes now. When he was asked on it, he said, look, he's definitely not available. He hasn't trained today, and we need to do some more tests and scans in the next few days to understand the extent of the injury. On if he's concerned by the injury, he said, I am concerned because he hasn't had many muscular injuries and he had to leave the pitch and was feeling something that's obviously never a good sign, especially for a player that is very, very explosive. So we are digging a little bit more to understand where we are in terms of the injury, and we will announce it when we know more on how Viktor Gyokeres is feeling. The fact he's had picked up this injury just at a time when he started to really score goals again, was played his best 45 minutes of the season at the weekend. He said he was very disappointed after the match with what he felt, but this is part of football. At the end of the day, if you expect a linear line, everything going up, it's not going to happen. If he's got something he's going to have to deal with, we will help him to do that. As you said, he was in a really good moment, really good form. It's very important for the team, but for tomorrow, we do not have him. Tonight, obviously, that means we do not have him. So that is it. And they are a little bit worrying, those comments. Now, I don't know what's wrong with Viktor Gyokeres. I've heard a couple of things. Neither of them match up. So it's all a bit up in the air in terms of what the actual issue is. Mikel was asked specifically, I think it was Art de Rocha asked him yesterday at the press conference, what muscle are you talking about? And he wouldn't say. He just said, I'll leave that for the doctors, which he always does, even though we don't get the opportunity to speak to the doctors. But those were the quotes, and I was listening to them. And when you read them on screen, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound too great, especially when he's talking about he's felt something, especially for a player that is very, very explosive. Immediately, my mind goes to something like a hamstring when he's talking about that. And you don't want that for Viktor Gyokeres. And it'll be a real, real blow for him. First of all, obviously, just when he's really, as I said, scoring goals again, played so well at the weekend in the first half against Burnley. And also just at a time when Kai Havertz is really close to coming back. And I was so looking forward to seeing those two play together, be able to share the minutes together. You know, Gyokeres has had to do so much work. You saw the difference against Burnley, I thought, when he had the rest in midweek, didn't play against Brighton in the Cup, just looked refreshed and so much sharper against Burnley. And I think with Havertz coming back, we're going to see that more and more because they're going to be able to share the burden, not going to be putting so much load into their legs every single week. And anyway, look, hopefully it's nothing to worry about. Hopefully maybe he misses Sunderland, doesn't go away with Sweden in the international break, and then he's fine for Spurs after the international break. That's, in my view, is you sort of thinking best case scenario there for that one. So it is definitely a way. It's just mad when you look at Arsenal's injuries at the moment. Now, barring Kepa, who we don't actually know if he's injured or if he's ill at the moment, but it looks like he hasn't travelled. He wasn't in training yesterday when we were at the training ground. Barring Kepa, every other injury in the squad right now, I suppose you can say Martin Odegaard, he's midfielder, but I kind of view Martin Odegaard as an attacker, number 10 type player. They're all forwards. Martinelli, Havertz, Jesus, Madueke, Gyokeres. It's mad. And it's suddenly, somehow, we've built this super squad that we spent a load of money on. Got players everywhere. And yet we're back to Mikel Merino potentially up front. You're just like, you're kidding. How has this happened? And it's just such a shame for Viktor Gyokeres. Hopefully, as we said, it's not too bad. Maybe he misses Sunderland. Hopefully, he's back after international break. I think that's what we're all going to be crossing our fingers and hoping. But he's certainly not going to be available for today's game. So it sort of begs the question in terms of what is Mikel going to do? How are you going to approach this? I'll get to my predicted 11 in a minute. It's quite tough, this predicted 11, in terms of what I think he's going to do because of the injuries. So he was asked in the press conference, how hard is it trying to strike a balance between rotating the squad? This is a second of 3 really tough, demanding away games in the space of 7 days for Arsenal with loads of travel. So how tough is it to balance that balance the squad, balance the rotation, but also knowing it is a big and important game for Arsenal. He says, yes, that's a situation we've been dealing with for a few weeks and trying to have the right freshness, the right cohesion within the team. The team has been competing really well in all different competitions. And tomorrow we know that we're going to have a really tough match here tonight, obviously. They are unbeaten at home all season. It's a team that are used to playing together. They have a really clear philosophy. They create a massive atmosphere as well. So we know it's going to be a really tough match. On Declan Rice, which we talked about in yesterday's show, in the decision facing Mikel there, that he's one booking away from a suspension. If he gets booked tonight, then he misses Bayern Munich. But obviously, there's no Zubimendi tonight because he's suspended. So what are you going to do there? He says it comes as well with the situation of Zubimendi. We know that Zubi was on 2 yellow cards as well. So that's a competition. At some point, you might miss players in crucial games. Obviously, we're going to try and avoid that as much as possible, but it's part of the competition. It's a tough one, the Declan Rice one. I think he'll play. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. I wouldn't play him in this. I have to say, I'd be saving him to make sure he's definitely fit for Bayern Munich because I want Declan Rice playing in that game. I think if Zubimendi was fit, then I think Declan Rice would definitely sit this game out. Not fit, sorry. If he was available, I think Declan Rice would definitely sit this game out. The fact he's not, I think he'll play. But ideally, for me, anyway, I wouldn't have him in this team. And it's just one of a number of sort of decisions Mikel is going to be facing. So this is the predicted 11 that I am going for today. This isn't the team that I would want, but this is what I think Mikel's going to go for. I was umming and ahhing about a few things here, so we'll talk through it. I think he changes the fullback. So obviously Raya will be in goal. I think he changes the fullback. So I think we'll see White and Lewis Skelly playing at fullback. I've stuck with Gabriel and Saliba as my two centre-backs. I was really thinking, now I would not be surprised if one of those two centre-backs doesn't play. Maybe Saliba, but given he was an injury doubt going into the Burnley game, maybe he plays Mosquera and keeps Gabriel in the side. But I've stuck with Gabriel and Saliba mainly there because I was thinking he's got Norgard ahead of him. They've got Norgard ahead of him. They haven't got their usual protection. So maybe he'll want the two, first choice centre-backs together for this game. Obviously, Norgard's going to play in the Zubimendi position. I'd be stunned if that doesn't happen. And then I've got Nwaneri and Rice as the two ahead of him. So Eza having a bit of a rest today. I think that makes sense. I think that's what he'll do. I've then gone Saka, Trossard, and I think he'll play Marino up front. I would play Harriman and Els up front for this game. And I'd play Marino where Rice is in this team. So that would be my ideal 11. I know it's a really important game. Obviously it is, but I also think Sunderland's a massively important game. And I also think Bayern Munich's a massively important game, which is why I wouldn't be playing Declan Rice. Maybe bring him on for 20 minutes in the second half if you need to try and go and win the game, if it's still all square, something like that. But for me, I'd be playing Harriman and Nous up front, and I'd have Marino in midfield alongside Nwaneri with Norgard behind, which I think is the same midfield three that we saw against Brighton as well. So that is ideally. I'd still have Saka, I'd still have Trossard. I mean, Arsenal don't have any other options. They could potentially play Eza, but if Eza plays today and then he plays against Sunderland, that's 5 starts in 14 days for Eza. So I imagine he'll be getting a rest today. So that's the predicted 11. So what I think Mikel's going to go for: Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly, Norgard, Nwaneri, Rice, Saka, Marino, Trossard. What I would go for would probably be the same back four. So Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis Skelly. Then I'll go Norgard, Nwaneri, Marino, Saka, Harriman, and Nous, and Trossard. Right, let's go through what some of you guys have been saying. So we got 5 hours behind on the Discord. Says, I think Mikel has to commit to rotation to do the best he can to keep as many players as fit as possible. So I would go for Kepa, Lewis Skelly, Hincapié, Mosquera, White, Norgard, Nwaneri, Marino, Dowman, Trossard, and Harriman and Nous. Is that the same team that played? Obviously, there's no Kepa, so he can't play. But was that the same side, outfield 11, that played against Brighton? I'm trying to remember if Trossard played on the left in that game or not. No, Eza played on the left in that game, didn't he? Apart from that, I think it's the same team. James says, personally, I would prefer not to play Rice, or certainly not start him. I want both he and Zubimendi for Bayern, if at all possible. Presuming Rice makes the Bayern game, have him take a yellow there so he can play against Inter 2 games after. Hagar says 100% Ethan for Eza. Slightly strange, John says there is a risk with Rice, but I'd go strong to try and guarantee as much as possible the 3 points early in this game and then make the subs, so there's less chance of getting 3 points against Bayern. Look to get 3 points each against Bruges, Almaty to secure a place in the top 8. Hope for at least a point against Bayern and Inter. I'd play Rice just for his set-piece accuracy. the top players only need to push hard for 2 more games and then they get a break. So your 11 for tonight, John, was Raya, White, Mosquera, Gabriel, Calafiori, Norgard, Rice, Eza, Saka, Gyokeres, and Trossard. Obviously, there's no Gyokeres, so he can't be involved. Aaron says, my team would be Raya, White, Mosquera, Gabriel, Hincapié, Norgard, MLS, Ranieri, Saka, Marino, and Trossard again. No David. Sorry, no, there is David Raya. Get myself confused there. I meant no Kepa. A few more now before we wrap this one up for today. Craig here, who's got in touch on YouTube, says, hi, Charles. My personal choice is to play MLS in midfield rather than left back. I'm sure he's up to it. Andrew says, Ranieri is such a talented player and he needs to be involved more while giving Eza some much needed rest. Saka must start and later in the game get Dauman in. P. Houston says, I would start without Rice. If we're chasing a goal, bring him in for 20 minutes or so, not least to take set pieces, etc. Yes, that's exactly how I would be going for this one. Robin says, if Marino plays up top, as I think he will, it means that the left 8 rotation is difficult. Hence, Eza might play. But what about Lewis Skelly at left 8, Hincapié at left back? I mean, I would like to see it. I think it'd be a really interesting option. And few of you are saying it, play Hincapié left back and have MLS in midfield. For me, it makes sense. I'd be surprised if Mikel does that, just because I haven't really seen him do it yet from the start. But maybe the addition of Hincapié, now he's fit, allows him to do that. Maybe that's what he's thinking in his head. So it'll be very interesting if we see it. I definitely get what you guys are talking about when you're suggesting that. And Ahmed says Mikel should go strong and replace early when the job is done. Remember, it's a big game too. We should not look too far forward. Only Rice to be on the bench, Norgard and Ethan to replace Rice and Zubamendi. So that's what you guys are saying. Lots of different sort of opinions there in terms of how Mikel should approach it. I do think that Lewis Skelly at the left 8 position would be an interesting one. I'm sure Lewis Skelly would absolutely love to get the chance to play there in this game, and maybe the addition of Hincapié is going to help with that. So we'll wait and see. But I don't see Mikel doing that. I've seen no sign, no suggestion that that's something that he's planning. But we shall see. And remember, it's an early kickoff today, everyone. It's not your 8 o'clock kickoff. So if you're finishing work at 5 o'clock and you haven't scheduled that into your day yet, then you need to. 5:45 kickoff UK time today. So it's an early one for the game. Right, let's talk about this now, because this is really interesting. Watching the press conference yesterday in Prague, you could tell Mikel was bubbling under the surface. He is not happy with what has been announced when it comes to the Carabao Cup. Obviously, the backstory to this was that because Palace are in the Conference League and will be playing on the Thursday of the week that the quarterfinal was originally scheduled for, if it was going to be played on the Tuesday, they were going to have to play Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday or Sunday, which obviously is mad. Crazy. So Palace aren't too happy with that. There's been talks and everything between the authorities, clubs and everything. And basically the clubs have now been told, okay, you're going to play on the 23rd of December, which is 2 days after Arsenal playing against Everton. Palace have got a game that day as well. So Palace will be playing Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Tuesday. I think the 23rd is a Tuesday. Yeah, it is a Tuesday. So that's what Palace will be doing in that week. Arsenal don't have a game that midweek, so they'll be playing weekend Sunday and then the Tuesday. It was decided that was the fairest thing for the clubs. They'll both have 2 days to recover from their Sunday game, so no one gets an advantage. They both get basically a disadvantage and both get a real danger for their play. I laugh, but I shouldn't be laughing because it's a ridiculous situation. But it is what it is. Anyway, that was announced as Arsenal were flying over to Prague yesterday. So just as they landed, they would have got the news probably on the plane. And Mikel went straight into the press conference. And you could see by his answers, he was really, really not happy about how this has all happened and what is going to be asked of his players. So this is what he had to say on the scheduling. He said, hopefully they will move our Premier League match, because to play 2 days later, it doesn't make any sense. We will now decide the date. I'm sure they will change the Premier League date as well. I don't think that's going to happen. I do not see the Premier League changing the date. It's already been changed to the Sunday. And I don't see how they're going to change it, because the whole idea is, unless they get rid of that Premier League day, unless Arsenal don't play against Everton, unless Palace don't play against whoever they're playing that weekend, I don't see them changing it, because they can't move it. They can't put it back to the Saturday, for example, because Palace will be playing on the Thursday. And the whole idea of having it on the moving this to the Tuesday is that both teams have the same recovery time, so no one has an advantage. So I don't see a way that Arsenal's game against Everton's moved, even though Mikel's saying that. I really don't. He then said, so if you made a request to the Premier League to move the game, And he says, I'll leave that to the club. I think we're very clear what's the best thing, the most logical date to play. I'm sure we'll have to adapt to that. If it's a disadvantage playing 2 games in 3 days, he said, I think, as I said today, that we'll apply the principles to the players first, then the supporters, and then the times. Now we need to have equality and the same chances for every club. So hopefully it will be fair. I just don't see this changing. I really don't see this changing now that they've decided it, now that they've announced it, despite protests from Arsenal. I don't know what Palace are thinking, but I just don't see a way they're changing this. Of course, this again brings into the sort of conversation. I've seen it on the Discord on the Inside Arsenal members as well about the Carabao Cup, about the state of the cup, whether it's worth it, all that sort of stuff. My big thing here is it's not ideal, obviously, and I think there's definitely changes to the League Cup that needs to be made. The two-legged semi-finals, of course, need to be scrapped as soon as they can be. I'm not sure they can be yet because you've got to wait until the current TV deal runs out. But once that runs out and it goes to tender process for the new one, it should just be a one-legged semi-final. Maybe played at a neutral stadium. I don't know, but it should definitely be a one-legged semi-final. So that I'm in agreement with. But I don't agree with the whole, we need to scrap the League Cup. I don't think that's right. What needs to be happening here is, and this is all down to the UEFA and European football here, that this has happened. They're the ones who have expanded existing competitions and playing extra fixtures in them, which take us to this point. They're the ones that have introduced a new competition in terms of the Conference League as well. They're the ones that decided that the Champions League, the first week of the Champions League, has to be this Super Champions League week, which is played Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and no other competition can be played that week, which means the Conference League and the Europa League has to be pushed back a later week, which is what's got us to this situation, because it's not Champions League games this is clashing with, it's the final round of the Conference League and Europa League games that it's clashing with. And that's because for whatever reason they've decided the Champions League has to have that first week all by itself. So this is all down to UEFA, really, that it has ended up clashing with the domestic football calendar. And I think the League Cup is still really, really important. I think it's really important for clubs like the bigger clubs like Arsenal, because it gives them an opportunity to play players who need minutes. We've seen that in the early rounds of the competition. So as much as Arsenal, some fans will look at it as a bit of a, sort of gets in the way. I think for Arteta, it's really useful because it allows him to play players who need minutes and make them feel involved in these big squads. I think for the lower league clubs, it's obviously very, very important. You look at the Port Vale game. I saw Tim Stillman's make a really good point on Twitter the other day, saying that was their biggest home attendance in 25 years because they got Arsenal in this stage of the competition. So that's really important for them as well. So I'm still not of the opinion that the League Cup needs to be scrapped because of this. I just think this all stems from just the pure greed of Europe, of the bigger clubs for wanting more fixtures, for wanting more money. And that is what is causing this issue. It's not the League Cup that's causing this issue. It's the greed of everyone of forcing more football, more competition down our throat when the football calendar just literally can't accommodate it. So that's my thought on it all. Anyway, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the situation. Anyway, look, that's it from me for today. I'll be back later on today. Sorry, after the game, I'll do a reaction and ratings video on the whistle as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that and come back and give me your thoughts on the game in the comments below when I do publish that video, and I'll pull some of them together and get them included in tomorrow's in-depth reaction show. Until then, enjoy the day, everyone. Enjoy the game later. I'll speak to you soon. Come on, the Arsenal. Bye-bye.